News Radio 610 WTVN.
Tonight we're going to have a guest back on, Cheri Perry, business workplace culture expert. Cheri's been on the show several times before, and without further ado, right out of the chute, Cheri, thanks for carving out some time today. Much appreciated.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure. What are we talking about today?
Well, we had kind of talked off air before. We've obviously got a country that is in turmoil right now, and I'm sure a lot of employers are kind of wondering, is it time to take the conversation about race into the workplace? And I guess my first question tonight, is that incumbent on the employer to kind of instigate that and start a forum with the employees?
It's a great question. And I would say that any business owner right now that is seeing what's going on around our country absolutely has to be thinking about, what are my staff members experiencing as a result of it? And so it does make sense that the business owner would say, listen, guys, let's talk about it.
And obviously that would make sense if you have, people of different colors and ethnicities, in your workplace. But what about if it's not so much? If it's mainly a white workplace, would you still have that conversation, mainly to prepare people to possibly know how to deal with customers or other people that they could come across?
Absolutely, not just for the customers or the other people that we might come across, but right now in America, we're having a massive crisis. And I don't think it matters if your workforce is all Black or all white or all Mexican American or whatever that is. I don't think it matters. I think right now we've got a scenario in our country where we all need to be involved in how we make sure that this conversation, at the end of the day, we take all of this pain, all of this frustration, all of this absolute anger, and we figure out how to turn it around. And we can't do that without having a conversation about it.
And so it sounds like a great idea, but when it comes right down to it, how do you get that conversation rolling? If you get your staff into a room together, and I saw something earlier today that said if it's uncomfortable, you're probably on the right track.
Yes, if it's not feeling absolutely cushy comfort, then yes, you might be on the right track. And that's exactly what this is. This kind of conversation is uncomfortable. And we have to get comfortable with talking about the things that are uncomfortable, but talking about it in such a way that people leave the conversation still feeling respected, still feeling like they belong, and still feeling like they add value to the company. So a lot of the companies that I'm working with across the country are asking these very same questions. And here's what we're encouraging. Have open conversations that go back to those 3 points that I just made: respect, belonging, and value. Do you feel respected in the work environment? And let's talk about it. Do you feel like you belong here? And again, let's talk about it. And hey, at the end of the day, do you feel truly valued here? And I don't think your skin color matters at all around that conversation. But I'll tell you what, if you've got an open, transparent workplace environment and you do have somebody feeling uncomfortable, you've got to have a place where people can talk about it.
So let's just say that conversation gets underway, and then somebody turns around and says, why did it take so long? Why did another Black man have to die before this conversation finally takes place in the workplace? How would you, advise people handle that type of a reaction?
Well, I would acknowledge their comment, and I would say, thank you for bringing that up. And the truth of the matter is that we're all busy being busy in the workplace environment, and sometimes we don't make the time for those necessary conversations. But today we are. So let's move forward and let's make sure that we don't have these kinds of challenges in our workplace, and that we're opening up our brains and our minds to what we can do to stop it.
Some places are not back in the office yet. Would you advise that, this conversation happens sooner rather than later, if it happens via Zoom meeting or conference call, or do you wait until you can kind of get everybody together in a room? Will it be more impactful when people are literally, obviously observing social distancing, but people can look at each other and see each other's faces and eyes and reactions as this conversation unfolds?
That's an incredibly great question, and I don't think you can wait. I think that the time to talk about it is right now. You can't turn on the TV, you can't look at Facebook, you can't look at any social media platform and not be bombarded with the messages, and they're not all good. And so, as a business leader, whether you're an owner or a leader in your company, you've got to help redirect the focus. And if that focus is not in a positive way, you can have people. I mean, I had a conversation with a young lady this morning, and tears in her eyes. I had no idea that she would have been so absolutely impacted, but she was sharing some personal stories about, she's got some friends and a sister who married a black gentleman, and her nephew has experienced some of these things. I didn't even know it. And she said, Cheri, this is really hurting our family. That's a conversation we wouldn't have had if we waited till the time was right, if we waited till everybody was back in the office. I think you got to have the conversation now.
Cheri Perry, business workplace culture expert, joining me tonight. Asking, is it time to take the conversation about race to the workplace? Can people participating in that conversation, can they be realistic with their thoughts and their feelings without fear of being judged or reprisal?
Well, I would love to say absolutely, but what it really boils down to is, what kind of workplace culture have you cultivated? If you've cultivated a workplace culture where people have to be real careful about what they say, or they have to walk around on eggshells, then this sensitive topic of racial disparity and all these things that are happening in our community is going to be a really tough one to have with your team. And so, in order to be able to have an environment where people can speak their mind without fear of repercussion, you've got to lay the foundation for that. And that's critically important. And when we work with the businesses around the country, it's, listen, as a business owner, I got to be okay with hearing things that are a bit uncomfortable. And so that's something that takes some time.
Sure. And so what happens if, the conversation is happening and for whatever reason, somebody just wants to tap out, says, I can't handle this. I'm not equipped to handle this. Do you just let them get up and go? I mean, I don't know how else you could keep them there. And who knows what kind of trouble they're having. Maybe it brings back painful memories. Maybe they're just too awkward to participate in the actual conversation itself, because as we said before, it could be very, very uncomfortable. And if it's uncomfortable, you're probably doing the right thing. So if an employee just gets up and walks out, how would you address that?
This is a sensitive issue. And if business owners haven't talked about this before, it's possible that they can find themselves backed up into a corner, or they get somebody that gets up and walks out. So, you got to go right to the heart. And here's what I would say to a staff member. I would say, I'm so sorry that you felt like you had to get up and walk out of the room. When you're ready, can we talk about it so I can make sure that you don't ever feel like that again? Because I respect you. I feel like you're a great part of my team, and I want to make sure that whatever it is, that we can work through it together. And I would ask their permission for that.
If your employer doesn't instigate something like this, I'm guessing that you would advise that a person, or possibly a committee of individuals, would approach the employer and try to get things moving in that direction.
Absolutely. If you've got a business owner that isn't talking about it, then knock on their door and say, can we talk about this? I noticed that there's some things happening, as far as at least conversations around the lunch table or so on, that are talking about this. And I really think that some leadership would be helpful. Can I be a part of that? And you know what? If the response that you get is a, no, we can't do it, or, you just a lockdown or something like that, you've really got to think about that. And business owners, the big thing right now to think about is, if you're not open to these kinds of communications, you're opening yourself up for losing good talent. You're opening yourself up for having discord in the workplace. Not cool.
If you go to your employer, let's just say you get a cool reception, they don't seem like they really want to pursue that. Would you advise, that people just go ahead and reach out to other staff on their own? Or would that be possibly a risky move that maybe backfires on them down the road?
Again, another very good question. If I had a staff member that wanted to talk about something very sensitive like this as a business owner and I wasn't willing to do it, I do think that, I mean, at some point, I'm going to have to recognize my responsibility as a leader and an opportunity missed. But I would say that anytime you're working in a work environment, if you've got a scenario where you feel like people on your team are hurting and you're having a heart to heart conversation, I think you got to talk about it, and hopefully it comes from leadership. But if it doesn't, we all have a leadership role. Let's take this situation that happened with Mr. Floyd for an example. There was one police officer on that man's neck, but there were three other police officers around him that could have changed the conversation. And that's the same thing in a workplace environment.
If need be, would you? And I suppose this would be dictated by the workplace itself. But a conversation like this, is it best to have it at work on work hours, or do you think people would be a little bit more chilled out and relaxed if it was after hours somewhere else?
Well, I think it would be more chilled out and after hours. And I also think if you're going to do it during work hours, you've also got to be respectful for the fact that you're being paid to do a job. So unless you're on a work break or something along those lines, lots of minutes and hours can be wasted away talking about the topic of the day. Even if a topic is something that's crying out to be discussed, people have got to be focused on what they are being paid to do. So after hours is great, or on a work break, or and so on. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully that business leader or owner is leading the conversation. But if not, you've got to be careful and respectful of the business owner's time as well.
All right, Cheri Perry, business workplace culture expert. You want to hit your website real quick?
You bet. My website is www.cheriperry.com. Let me spell it. CHERIP as in passion, ERRY.com. I've got some great tools on there for your listeners so that they can get some good morale boosting stuff on there. And we'll have some diversity information on there as well very, very shortly.
All right, Cheri, I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Appreciate your time, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Traffic and weather together.